So for example, we all agree that the value of chocolate ultimately depends on the fact that people like it. No one thinks that had human beings all found chocolate disgusting, we would have been missing an independent fact about chocolate's value. So the value of chocolate is supposed to be analogous to moral values, or to you ought to save the drowning child. The value of chocolate is not independent of our attitudes towards chocolate in the broadest sense. Similarly, whether you ought to save the drowning child is not independent of our attitudes in the broadest sense. So what sort of mind dependence about value do we end up with on your view? I think you've already partly answered this. So one sort of extreme view, it sounds like, well, you know, if we had all, well, actually, maybe this is your view. If we had all approved of cruelty, then cruelty would have been good. Or if we had all approved of letting drowning children die, or if that, we're just completely unmoved by the plight of drowning children in general, or maybe it just gives us a twinge of excitement to see children drown in ponds. In that scenario, would it have been right to move on and not save the drowning child? Or do you think that the mind dependence of value could take a less extreme form?
So good. So there are, first of all, I do want to emphasize that, you know, that chocolate morality analogy may come across as a little glib, and my view is that there are many different reasons to think these are extremely different cases for human beings. That being said, you know, the view that I support is that ultimately the goodness or value or requiredness of things is something that's a function of what we happen to care about. So yeah, like I said earlier, there are tricky things going on here with sort of terminology, like cruelty almost, you know, some people consider that a thick, called a thick concept. And so if we put it in more neutral terms, like
if we had approved of boiling babies for
fun, that's right. And then I also would want to, I think, and then would that have been morally right? I think there's trickiness there, because moral rightness, as opposed to some more general term, like would that have been the thing to do? Like there are things sort of almost built in, like we might not even recognize something as morality or as a moral system if it involves stuff like boiling children for fun. But nevertheless, the question, my view in fact is that there is ultimately this dependence of what's the good course of action, what an agent should or has most reason to do is ultimately a function of their evaluative makeup. And so in a way, I also wouldn't talk about relativity of reasons or the thing to do to to like us in general. But I do think that if you have a being who does not care at all, who is just utterly unmoved by seeing a drowning child, for example, then, you know, and is utterly sort of internally, logically consistent. You know, they're not making any mistakes. Like they know the kid is going to die. They know the parents are going to grieve. They know what grief is like, and they still just don't care. Then my view, again, does involve saying, well, there are no facts out there in the universe apart from valuers that being is missing. Now, that doesn't mean we can't, those of us who care about children can't say, let's lock this person up. We can say a lot of other things about them. So that's a quick.
But we can't point to the person and say, you ought not to move.
Well, the thing is, we could, but we'd be saying something false. And sometimes there's good reason to say something false. If you think someone's life is on the line, you might. But yeah, the view is that no, it's false that there are robustly attitude independent facts about what one should do. And that's driven by the my sense that the hypothesis that there are these robustly mind-independent normative facts or evaluative facts, that it just doesn't cohere with the rest of
Okay, all right. I can't resist asking you, just ending, we've already used up like half an hour of your extremely valuable time, but just to end with a biographical question. So did, in your own personal thinking about morality and the force of it and so on, did this strike you with the force of some perhaps alarming revelation that, oh my gosh, this is what morality is like? Its demands aren't completely universal and independent of human sensibilities? Or did you kind of already think that that's what morality was about in the first place, that it wasn't really like? So I guess I began this whole thing by asking whether morality was just like astronomy, that the moral facts are out there waiting for us to discover them, and what we think of them or what attitude we take towards what we ought to do, that's just a completely separate question from what the facts actually are.
Good. Yeah. Well,
did you start out with that view or not?
Yeah. No. So autobiographically, I think I've always had a mind-dependent conception of value. So this, that there is that part at the end of the paper where I say, will this undermine your views? Well, it depends on the meta-ethics you went into this with. And if you sort of all along thought that, and the way I would put it is that it has always seemed right to me. So, I have been an atheist basically my entire life. So it never seemed plausible to me that moral commands were coming from the outside in some really strong sense. Like it seemed, in a way, I think pretty intuitively, most of us would think intuitively ethics isn't like astronomy in the sense of, there are a lot of obvious differences right away. In any case, it always seemed plausible to me, and not undermining really at all, to think that what it is for something to matter in the end is for it to matter to one of us. And I don't think that ultimately cheapens value. It just seems right to me. It just seems that, that value wouldn't be there, so to speak, except for the fact that there are beings like us who love and hope and wish for things and care about things. And so, this was never, it wasn't a disturbing or undermining sort of conclusion for me to reach. It was just an argument for what I thought was correct.
All right. Well, Sharon, thank you again for taking the time.
Sure, my pleasure.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to talk.